What started as an accident became his greatest victory. The soft hum of recycled air filled the empty corridors of Nexus 7 as Zara Thorne made her way through the dimly lit maintenance sections. Her boots echoed against the metal flooring, the only sound breaking the peaceful silence of the night shift. She carried her toolkit with practiced ease, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, grease stains marking her work uniform like badges of honor. Zara had been working on this station for 3 years now, fixing what others broke, maintaining what others ignored. She wasn't a hero or a soldier, just someone who kept the lights on and the engines running. Tonight felt no different from any other, except for the unusual assignment waiting in Docking Bay 7. The experimental ship sat like a sleeping giant in the bay, its hull gleaming under the harsh work lights. The vessel was unlike anything Zara had seen before, sleek and organic in design, with curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Strange symbols were etched along its sides, and she could swear they sometimes seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Her assignment was simple: run diagnostics on the ship's systems and report any anomalies. The research team had been studying this vessel for months after discovering it drifting in space, apparently abandoned. No one knew who built it or where it came from, but the technology was decades ahead of anything humanity possessed. Approached the access panel, her fingers dancing across the familiar interface. The ship's systems came online with a gentle whisper, displays flickering to life in languages she couldn't read. She connected her diagnostic equipment and began the routine checks, watching as streams of data flowed across her screens. Everything seemed normal until she reached the final sequence. The ship's central system requested a confirmation code, something not mentioned in her briefing. Zara frowned, checking her notes again. The instruction manual was vague, showing only a series of symbols that looked similar to those on her display. Fatigue weighed on her shoulders as she studied the screen. She had been working double shifts for weeks, covering for colleagues who had fallen ill. Her vision blurred slightly as she tried to match the symbols, her finger hovering over what she hoped was the right sequence. The moment she pressed the final symbol, everything changed. The ship's systems exploded into activity, lights racing along its hull like neural pathways firing. A deep thrumming filled the bay as the vessel's engines came online. Not the harsh roar of human technology, but something altogether more sophisticated. The docking clamps released with a soft hiss, and Zara watched in horror as the ship began to rise. "No, no, no," she whispered, frantically trying to access the emergency protocols. But her equipment was no longer connected to the ship's systems. Whatever she had activated had locked her out completely. The bay doors began to open, revealing the star-filled void beyond. The ship moved with graceful purpose, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Zara could only stand there, helpless. As her mistake drifted out into space within minutes, the station's alarms began to wail. Red lights flashed through the corridors as the emergency systems activated. Zara's communicator crackled to life, with urgent voices demanding to know what had happened in Docking Bay 7. But something else was happening too. The station's long-range sensors had detected movement in the outer system, ships approaching from the direction of the nebula. Unknown vessels, moving with purpose toward Nexus-7. As Zara watched through the bay's observation window, she saw the experimental ship change course, no longer drifting but flying with clear intent toward the approaching fleet. Whatever she had awakened was about to make first contact with an alien species, and humanity was completely unprepared. The maintenance engineer, who had just wanted to finish her shift and go home, had accidentally started the most important event in human history. Her hands trembled as she reached for her communicator, knowing that everything was about to change forever. Captain Jace Raven sat in the station's bar, nursing his third drink of the evening and trying to forget why he was no longer flying missions. The alcohol burned slightly as it went down, but not enough to numb the memories of his last command. 6 months ago, he had been leading fighter squadrons against pirates in the Outer Rim. Now he was grounded, his reputation destroyed by a single moment of hesitation that cost lives. The alarm shattered the bar's quiet atmosphere, sending the few remaining patrons scrambling for safety. Jace's military training kicked in despite his current status, and he found himself moving toward the command center before he even realized what he was doing. The corridors were filled with running personnel, their faces tight with fear and confusion. Jace caught fragments of conversation as he moved through the chaos. Unknown ship launched. Alien contact. All hands to battle stations. His pulse quickened as he recognized the signs of a crisis unfolding. A command center was a storm of activity when he arrived. Officers shouted orders across the room, while technicians worked frantically at their stations. On the main display, Jace could see the tactical situation. A cluster of unknown ships approaching from the nebula, and a single vessel from their own station moving to intercept. "What's the situation?" he asked the nearest officer, a young lieutenant. He recognized from the officers' club. "Unknown, sir. One of our experimental ships launched without authorization about 20 minutes ago. Now we have what looks like a first contact scenario developing." The lieutenant's voice cracked with stress. Jace studied the display, his experienced eye taking in the formation of the approaching ships. They moved with a coordination that suggested military discipline, but their approach vector was cautious, rather than aggressive. The single human ship was vastly outnumbered, but it continued on its intercept course. "Has anyone tried to communicate with our ship?" Jace asked. "No response to any standard frequencies," came the reply from the communication station. "It's like there's no one aboard." That was when Jace noticed something strange. The ship's movement pattern was too smooth, too perfect. No human pilot flew with that kind of precision. As he watched, the vessel began broadcasting on a frequency that made his teeth ache, a signal that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his mind. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like someone trying to speak a language he had never heard but somehow understood. Images flashed through his consciousness. Vast spaces between stars, beings of light and energy, a desperate search for something lost. The ship wasn't just broadcasting, it was trying to communicate. "Can you hear it?" he asked the lieutenant, but the young man only looked confused. "Hear what, sir?" Jace realized he was the only one receiving the signal. Something about his neural patterns, perhaps damaged by the same incident that had grounded him, allowed him to interface with the ship's communication system. The vessel was calling to him, seeking a connection. Without thinking, he moved to an unused console and began entering commands. His fingers seemed to know what to do, guided by the strange connection forming between his mind and the ship's intelligence. The tactical display shifted, showing him the situation from the ship's perspective. The approaching aliens weren't invaders. They were refugees, fleeing from something that had destroyed their home system. The ship he was connected to was one of theirs, lost during their escape and drifting in space until the humans found it. It had been waiting, hoping for someone who could help it reunite with its people. But the station's defenses were powering up, preparing to fire on the alien fleet. Years of military conditioning had everyone assuming this was an attack, when in reality it was a desperate attempt at reunion. "Stand down weapons," Jace called out, his voice carrying the authority of his former rank. "They're not hostile." "Captain Raven, you're not authorized to give orders here," the station commander replied sharply. "Return to quarters immediately." But Jace was already moving, a connection with the ship growing stronger by the moment. Through its sensors, he could feel the fear and hope of the alien refugees. Their relief at finding their lost vessel, their confusion at humanity's aggressive posture. He had to reach the ship, had to help it communicate with both sides before someone made a mistake that would cost lives. The maintenance engineer, who had accidentally launched the vessel, was still in the docking bay, and together they might be able to prevent a tragedy. As he ran through the corridors, Jace felt something he hadn't experienced in months: purpose. His disgrace had brought him to this moment, this chance to be part of something greater than himself. The ship's presence in his mind was warm and welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. Zara was still staring out the observation window when the docking bay doors hissed open behind her. She turned to see a tall man in a flight suit approaching, his face intense with purpose. She recognized him immediately. Captain Jace Raven, the disgraced pilot who had become something of a legend among the station's crew. "You're the one who launched the ship," he said, not accusingly, but with understanding. "I can feel it calling to you, too." Zara's eyes widened. "You can hear it? More than hear. It's like it's inside my head, showing me things." Jace moved to stand beside her at the window. "The aliens aren't attacking. They're trying to come home." As if responding to their conversation, the ship in the distance began to pulse with a soft blue light. The pattern was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, and Zara found herself unconsciously matching her breathing to its rhythm. The strange symbols on her diagnostic equipment began to glow with the same gentle radiance. "The ship is trying to bridge the gap between species," Jace continued. "But the station's about to open fire. We need to get out there and help it communicate." Zara looked at him as if he had suggested they sprout wings and fly. "Get out there? And what?" "Everything else is locked down for the emergency." That was when they heard the soft footsteps behind them. They turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows near the ship's former docking station. She was humanoid, but clearly not human, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light, and eyes that held depths like distant stars. "Please," she said in accented but clear English, "do not be afraid. I am Kiravex, diplomatic, envoy to your people. I have been aboard your station for 3 cycles, learning your ways." Zara's mind reeled. An alien had been living among them for months, and no one had known. "You're one of them, the refugees. We are scholars and artists, engineers and teachers. Our world was consumed by a cosmic storm that your people call a supernova. We have been searching for our lost ship for many seasons." Kira's voice held a musical quality that made even her sadness sound beautiful. "When your maintenance systems awakened it, we felt the call across the void." Jace stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively to Zara's shoulder in a protective gesture. "Why didn't you reveal yourself before?" "We had to be certain your people could accept us. Your species has a history of violence toward the unknown." Kira's gaze moved between them, and Zara felt as if the alien woman was seeing directly into her soul. "But you two have formed a connection with our ship. Through you, perhaps understanding is possible." The ship's pulsing grew stronger, and Zara realized she could feel Jace's presence in her mind, a warm, steady presence that made her feel less alone. Their shared connection to the vessel was creating a bond between them as well. "The station's weapons are almost fully charged," Jace said urgently. "We need to get aboard and help the ship communicate with both sides." Kira nodded toward a small shuttle craft tucked in the corner of the bay. "That vessel has been modified with our technology. It can reach the ship safely." As they prepared to leave, Zara found herself working closely with Jace, their hands occasionally touching as they checked the shuttle's systems. Each contact sent a small thrill through her, a connection that went beyond the alien ship's influence. She had noticed him before, of course. It was impossible not to notice someone with his reputation, but she had never expected to find herself drawn to him. "You know this is probably suicide," she said as they sealed the shuttle's hatch. "Probably," Jace agreed, taking the pilot's seat. But it's the right thing to do. Kira settled into the passenger area, her presence somehow calming despite the circumstances. Your species has a saying, love conquers all. Perhaps it is time to test that theory. The shuttle launched smoothly, its alien-enhanced engines carrying them toward the ship that had started everything. As they flew through the void between the station and the refugee fleet, Zara felt the connection between herself and Jace growing stronger. They were no longer just two people thrown together by circumstances. They were partners in something that could change the future of both species. The ship welcomed them aboard with a soft hum of recognition, its corridors lighting up as they moved through it. At its heart, they found the communication center, a crystalline chamber that pulsed with the same blue light they had seen from the station. Now, Kira said, we must trust in the power of connection to bridge the gap between worlds. The ship's communication chamber was unlike anything Zara had ever seen. Crystalline structures grew from the walls like living things, pulsing with soft light that seemed to respond to their presence. In the center of the room, a raised platform held what appeared to be a control interface, but it was clearly designed for mental rather than physical interaction. The ship's consciousness is ancient, Kara explained as they approached the platform. It has been waiting for minds that could bridge the gap between our peoples. Jace stepped forward first, placing his hands on the smooth surface. Immediately, the chamber filled with a warm humming sound, and the crystals began to glow more brightly. Zara could feel his thoughts through their connection, his determination to prevent bloodshed, his growing feelings for her that he was trying to keep professional. I can feel the station's weapons charging, he said, his voice tight with concentration. And the fear of the refugee ships. They're all so afraid of each other. Zara joined him on the platform, her hands covering his. The moment their skin touched, the ship's consciousness enveloped them both, and suddenly they were experiencing the situation from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Through the station's sensors, they felt the military tension, the readiness to defend against what appeared to be an invasion. But they also experienced the refugees' desperate hope, their joy at finding their lost ship, their confusion at humanity's hostile response. There's something else, Zara said, her voice distant, as she processed the information flowing through her mind. Someone on the station is deliberately preventing communication. The standard diplomatic frequencies are being jammed. Kira's expression darkened. Admiral Stone. I have been trying to establish formal contact with him for months, but he has been avoiding me. I suspect he knows more about our situation than he has admitted. The ship's consciousness guided them deeper into the station's communication networks, showing them the hidden messages that had been sent to military headquarters. Admiral Stone had been reporting the alien presence as a potential threat, requesting authorization to use force if necessary. He's been planning this, Jace said with growing anger. He wants a conflict. It would justify his request for additional military funding, make him look like a hero defending humanity. But as they delved deeper into the ship's memories, they discovered something that changed everything. The vessel had been damaged during the refugees' escape, its navigation systems corrupted. It hadn't been drifting randomly through space. It had been following a specific signal, one that had been broadcasting from human space for decades. The signal is coming from Earth, Zara realized, from the deep space monitoring station that's been searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. The ship was trying to make contact, but it couldn't communicate properly because of the damage. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on any of them. Humanity had been desperately searching for signs of alien intelligence, and when it finally found them, the military's first instinct was to prepare for war. Through the ship's enhanced communication systems, they began broadcasting the truth to both sides. The refugees' story, their peaceful intentions, the real reason for their arrival. But they also revealed Admiral Stone's deception, his deliberate obstruction of diplomatic contact. The response was immediate and dramatic. On the station, other officers began to question Stone's orders. Among the refugee fleet, ships began to power down their defensive systems, broadcasting messages of peace and gratitude. But Stone wasn't finished. Through the ship's sensors, they watched as he manually overrode the station's safety protocols, bringing the main weapons online despite the objections of his own officers. "He's going to fire anyway," Jace said, his hands tightening on the controls. "Even if it means starting a war with a peaceful species." Zara felt her heart racing, not just from the danger, but from the realization of how much Jace meant to her. In the space of a few hours, he had gone from being a disgraced pilot she barely knew to someone she couldn't imagine living without. "Whatever happens," she said, her voice soft in the humming chamber. "I'm glad we're together." Jace turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the crystal's glow. "When this is over, I want to show you something." The sunrise from the observation deck. "I've been watching it alone for months, but I think it would be beautiful with you there." The ship's consciousness wrapped around them like a warm embrace, amplifying their connection to each other and to the peaceful resolution they were fighting for. But the weapons were still charging, and Admiral Stone was still determined to be the hero of his own twisted narrative. They had moments to prevent a tragedy that would echo through history. The crystalline chamber pulsed with urgent energy as the ship's consciousness showed them the charging weapons array on Nexus 7. Admiral Stone had locked out all other command access, his finger hovering over the firing control as he prepared to make himself the hero of humanity's first interstellar war. "We need to get back to the station," Jace said, but Kira shook her head. "There is no time. The weapons will fire in moments. But there is another way." She gestured to the ship's central consciousness, its crystalline heart now blazing with light. "This vessel can interface with your station's systems directly, but it requires a perfect link between human and alien minds." Zara understood immediately. "You need all three of us connected." "The risk is great," Kira warned. "Our consciousness will be fully merged with the ship's. We may not be able to separate again." Through the platform beneath their hands, Zara felt Jace's response before he spoke it. "Some things are worth the risk." They joined hands around the crystal core, human and alien fingers intertwining as the ship's ancient consciousness embraced them. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like trying to hold an ocean in a teacup, but gradually their minds learned to work together. Through the ship's sensors, they reached into Nexus 7's computer systems, racing through security protocols that had never been designed to stop an intelligence like theirs. They found Admiral Stone in the command center, his face twisted with determination as he prepared to fire on the refugee fleet. But they also found something else. Dozens of crew members throughout the station who had been listening to their broadcasts. People who understood that this was humanity's chance to join a larger galactic community. "We can't stop him directly," Zara realized, her consciousness flowing through the ship's systems like water, finding its own level. "But we don't have to." Instead of trying to override Stone's commands, they simply opened every communication channel on the station. The truth flooded through the corridors. The refugees' story, their peaceful intentions, their gratitude for the humans who had found their lost ship. The crew heard Kira's voice, explaining her months of careful observation, her growing respect for human creativity and determination. Most importantly, they heard the story of the maintenance engineer and the disgraced pilot who had accidentally started the most important diplomatic contact in human history. The response was immediate. Throughout the station, crew members began to abandon their posts, refusing to participate in an unprovoked attack on peaceful refugees. The weapons systems required multiple operators to function safely, and one by one, they stepped away from their stations. Stone's voice echoed through the command center as he realized what was happening. "This is mutiny. I'll have you all court-martialed." But his threats fell on deaf ears. The crew had seen the truth, felt the connection between species that the ship had made possible. They understood that this moment would define humanity's future among the stars. Through the ship's consciousness, Zara felt the weapons powering down, their energy redirected to the station's communication arrays. Instead of weapons of war, they became beacons of peace, broadcasting messages of welcome to the refugee fleet. The aliens' response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships throughout the fleet began to approach the station, their hulls glowing with the same soft light that filled the chamber where Zara, Jace, and Kira maintained their connection. "It's beautiful," Zara whispered. Her consciousness merged so completely with the ship's that she could feel the joy of every refugee, the wonder of every human crew member watching their first real contact with an alien species. But as the immediate crisis passed, they found themselves facing a new challenge. The ship's consciousness was so vast, so welcoming, that separating from it seemed impossible. They could remain here forever, part of something greater than themselves, facilitating communication between species for generations to come. "We have to go back," Jace said, though his mental voice was reluctant. "People need to know that humans and aliens can work together as individuals, not just as part of a collective consciousness." Slowly, carefully, they began to separate their minds from the ship's embrace. The process was like learning to walk again, remembering how to exist as individual beings rather than part of a greater whole. When they finally opened their eyes, in the crystalline chamber, they found themselves still holding hands, the connection between them stronger than ever. The ship's consciousness had retreated, but not disappeared, leaving them with a permanent link to each other and to the peaceful resolution they had helped create. Outside the chamber's transparent walls, they could see the refugee ships docking, with Nexus 7, aliens and humans meeting face-to-face for the first time. The maintenance engineer's accident had become humanity's greatest victory, not through violence, but through understanding. "So," Jace said, his voice soft in the gentle light of the chamber, "about that sunrise. I believe I promised to show you the view from the observation deck." Zara smiled, her hand still warm in his. "I think we've earned it." As they prepared to return to the station, Kira placed a gentle hand on both their shoulders. "Your species has a bright future among the stars. This ship will always remember the courage of those who chose peace over war." The accidental launch had indeed become the greatest victory in human history, proving that sometimes the most important discoveries come not from careful planning, but from the courage to embrace the unknown and the wisdom to choose love over fear. Through the ship's crystalline walls, they watched the sun rise over the joined fleets of two species, the first dawn of a new era of cooperation and understanding among the stars.